966.
We're delighted to welcome onto the 966 Dana Alajlani, who is head of public affairs for the GCC at Sanofi, the French multinational pharmaceutical and healthcare company headquartered in Paris. Dana is also co-chairwoman of the American Chamber of Commerce in Saudi Arabia, AmChamKSA, and is involved there with the Women in Business Committee. Dana, welcome to the 966. Hello.
Hi, thank you for having me on the show.
Hi, Dana. So excited. How this happened. Dana, you and I first met when you were public and government affairs with ExxonMobil, and I was quite impressed then. You moved on to bigger and bigger things. And although you're working for a European company, we still love you. But I was looking, and we have had Bill Foster at AmChamKSA, the president of KSA, and I've sort of been watching the Women in Business Committee for some time. I think it's 3 years in, established 3 years ago, if that's correct. I just happened to look, and I said, and it looked co-chair, Dana Alajlani. I guess, oh, how lucky are we? So I reached out to you to talk about this, and you said, great. And so we're really looking forward to talking about the Women in Business Committee, but also your personal story and your take on sort of the ecosystem and the environment for women working in Saudi Arabia, the employment issues, any number of things. But let's go back and get a baseline. Let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Sure. So yes, I was very happy to hear from you also, Richard. Clearly, women and inclusion in the workplace is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And the reason for that is, so I'm a Saudi who got the opportunity to get educated abroad. And I came back and I started my career almost 20 years ago. It's always shocks me when I say that, but it was a very different Saudi Arabia. And this is, before Vision 2030 and before all of these changes. And so clearly things were not very easy at the time. And so I personally know what it feels like to be the only woman in the room. And in my specific case, many of the times, the first woman who has ever been employed by that organization. And so, given these challenges, I think that a theme that kind of developed over my career, and I think unconsciously I kind of went for the jobs where I was told that no woman or Saudi woman has ever taken on these roles. And so I always tried to work hard, get these roles, and then, just to prove that Saudi women are capable. And then in my own way of giving back, I tried through mentorship and advocacy and sponsorship to support in making sure that when I left those organizations, I was no longer the only woman at the organization. So really, it's been a theme that's followed my career, and I ended up by chance pursuing a career that involves, I do government engagement and negotiations, which, as you can appreciate, 12, 13 years ago was not a very typical career path for a woman. And there weren't, in fact, many women in the government at that point in time. Thankfully, things have changed, but it's a different Saudi Arabia today.
We already, my mind's turning. So it is. So your purview now is broader. So your GCC, you're looking at all the Gulf Cooperation Council states. Are you interacting with a lot of women at your level?
Okay, so yes and no. In terms of government engagement, I think that with Vision 2030, there have been a lot of women that have been put in senior roles. And an example is Her Royal Highness Princess Rima in the US. And so you can see that in some senior government roles, there are now women as deputy ministers. However, in the corporate world, sometimes this trend has not been as visible, and there aren't as many women in senior roles in the corporate world. Now, when you look at other countries, You see also there's a similar kind of trend in the UAE or in other countries, like, for example, in the UAE, you have some women who are ministers. We're not in that position yet in Saudi Arabia. So it differs from country to country. And so yes and no, it depends.
Yeah, and I apologize. I sort of went off script there because I thought that it's interesting because your vision is bigger now. But let's talk about the Women in Business Committee. And we had a fascinating discussion a couple of weeks ago about the trajectory that committee has gone on. And you just finished up what you thought was a really successful mentorship program. Can you talk about, the path that Women in Business Committee has taken and why it's sort of changed some of its targets?
Yes. So I have been blessed with first parents who pushed me to always, try my best and go for all of these positions that were not open for women. And then as a mother and a wife, I had to juggle work-life balance. And so without the support of my husband to enable me to take on these roles and to put up my hand, a lot of the things that I have achieved would not have been possible. And so I know that women sometimes need a little bit more of a support system in order to enable them to go for these, to develop their career. And so I found myself always gravitating, it's been, I think now for 7 or 8 years, towards being part of the corporate women networks at the organizations where I work. So, they're called different things. And for example, today I co-chair at Sanofi, it's called Gender Balance Employee Resource Group. So I co-chair that. So I do that internally. And then externally, I co-chair the Women in Business. So I think that being part of these type of committees gives you the opportunity to support a cause that you believe in, but also to reflect back on some of the things that have helped you in your career, and therefore come up with programs that can potentially help other women in their careers. So when we first started WIB, we focused a lot on entrepreneurs, and there was a reason for that. In Saudi Arabia, if you look back 20, 30 years ago, some of the sectors that were open to women were the nonprofit sector, were the healthcare sector, and a good way for somebody to potentially enter the workforce and get around some of these limitations was to start their own business. And so there are some very important entrepreneurs that started their businesses 20, 30 years ago. And therefore, this was the focus of WIB when we first started. But it became apparent after the first year that there's a lot of focus from the government and the private sector on programs to support women entrepreneurs in the kingdom, which is great. And therefore, we felt that perhaps we could use our resources and our knowledge to support women in a different way. And we felt that there was a gap in supporting women in advancing their career in the corporate world. And so this is where we sat down and we thought of how can we help them. One of the things that has personally shaped my career is mentorship. So I have personally been blessed by mentors who walked into my life at a time when I least expected it and transformed my career in ways that I never thought was possible. And how they did that was through, for example, kind of helping me understand the external environment and translate that into, opportunities, and put my hand up when opportunities came along. And sometimes even when I didn't think I was ready, they pushed me to take on these roles. And so I felt that mentorship really helped me achieve some of the goals that I've achieved today. And the women in the Women in Business Committee felt strongly about mentorship. So that is when we started building our flagship program about a couple of years ago. We've done it twice so far. And then over those 2 years, it wasn't even enough to launch it last year. What we did was we launched it, we evaluated it, we edited it, we made sure that it effectively helped women. And we have some amazing success stories that came out of the mentorship program, like women getting promotions, women resigning and getting another job at another company, you know, and so really like pushing their careers forward. And so that's how we've developed some of the programs in the Women in Business. And now they're really focused on helping women in the corporate world, you know, push their career and progress their career into these more senior roles.
So in the Saudi work environment, and I think maybe you can talk about this, in terms of employment of women, there are some 2030 benchmarks which have already been hit.
Yes.
But I get the sense with your mentorship program that it's sort of beyond the metrics. It's about what the experience is and what the challenges these women are facing in the workplace, which is not just, it's no longer a legal equality, which is, I think, has been mandated to a large extent, but there are any number of other issues. Can you talk a little bit about, over the course of these 2 years, what are the issues that women who are trying to advance in the corporate workplace in Saudi Arabia are facing, if there are priority issues?
So yes, it's true. Thankfully, with Vision 2030, we've reached these targets. So the target was 30%. And I think the last report I saw, it stands at 33%. So which is amazing. When I joined the workforce, it was, I think, 9%. And so these are amazing achievements. I always push myself to, you know, so what's next? What can we do more? And so some of the challenges, I think, remain in the fact that when you look at how this diversity has been achieved, you will find a higher percentage of women at entry level, and then a few at senior level that were appointed. But then there's a gap in the middle. Mm-hmm. So I feel that the next chapter that we need to address in the corporate world, in the government sector, is looking at this middle layer and then looking at the top layer and having the diversity, the 30%, 33% reflected in the entire organization from entry level all the way to the board. So I feel that this is really like the next thing that we need to focus on, and this is something that our mentorship program supports with, because these are the kind of, so we have criteria for who we accept in the mentorship program, and typically it's women with a few years of experience, because really we're looking to accelerate their career in that middle management area.
And culturally, we talked a little bit, a lot of these are women middle managers, but there's still, would you characterize them as a younger cohort? I mean, obviously, you know, there's not a lot, the number of 55 to 60-year-old women who are working in the Saudi workforce is very small because the base is so small. They didn't have an opportunity. But as women are coming in, each of these cohort groups will get bigger and bigger. This cohort group, when they come into a corporate environment, and even though legally there's equity, are they being accepted? Is there resistance? Is it, and that's a broad statement, but just in terms of sort of a broad take on it, what are the major sort of cultural challenges they're seeing in trying to move ahead, trying to establish themselves, trying to earn the respect and regard that would help them move forward in a company?
So yes, you've touched on another aspect of diversity, which we're seeing playing out right now with all of these young women and younger generation. There's a very big momentum behind Vision 2030, and therefore there's a very big influx into the private sector and the government sector, with, you know, wanting to be part of the change. And so historically, when you look at the leaders in the past in the government and in the private sector, a lot of them are older men, and technology was not part of their, you know, career or daily use. And so you have a different type of diversity that's playing out right now, and it's really generational diversity, where there is this older generation that has a lot of knowledge and a lot of experiences to share, and this influx of this new generation that's coming in, and really connecting them both is very important. So through the mentorship program, we tried to do that, but it's not only through the mentorship program, it's also through things like your show, honestly, because your show uses technology and social media, which are mediums that appeal to this generation. So for the older generation to use these tools to connect with with the younger generation, to make sure that this knowledge is not lost and that there's a bridge between what has been done in the past and what we're trying to do in the future.
It's fascinating. So, and you could, I guess this tension, I wouldn't characterize it tension, but this reality is not only just young women, it's, young males, the same dynamic. Interesting that they have that to share. The women who are coming into the mentorship program and there's there's an application process. So these young women are, and they're not necessarily young, but they're skilled, the professional. Obviously, they're very motivated because they're attracted to this in order to move forward. Where are these women looking for jobs? And I say that because there's an interesting dynamic that was brought up to us we have an ongoing discussion. Lucian can confirm our ongoing discussion with an avid listener, talking about where young talent goes. And the point was, we have things like PIF, we have these largely state-owned organizations who are paying pretty good money, for sure. Then we have a growing group of corporates who are expanding their base, lots of influx of people opening offices, and you're familiar with the regional HQ process. There's a lot of job opportunities coming to Riyadh. There's a lot of job opportunities being created by the government. Where are these women going, these professional women?
So we talked a little bit about the momentum behind Vision 2030. It's really invigorated the younger generation, and many of them want to be part of the change. And so given that, they are gravitating towards the government sector. So we're in a situation where the private sector is competing very aggressively with the government sector for talent. And I think, that's great because, like I told you, I started my career, I do government engagement, and there were no women in the room, no women in the building. In certain entities, there weren't even restrooms for women, right? So this is a sector that historically did not have many women in it. So for you now to go to a government entity and see almost gender parity sometimes in certain meetings and in certain forums, it's pretty impressive. And I understand their drive, because even in the corporate sector, like my job is government engagement and working on aligning Vision 2030 projects with business opportunities. And so it's really a source of excitement and motivation. And so we find a lot of these women and men, young graduates from abroad, from the universities here in Saudi Arabia, gravitating towards the government sector. So the private sector is trying to attract this talent. Sometimes they can't pay the salaries that are being paid by the private sector. So this is a challenge. And sometimes the projects are not going to be as visible or clearly linked to Vision 2030, and so maybe some of them will not see the excitement of working in the corporate world. So this is the kind of dynamics that we're seeing right now. But I feel that the tide is shifting a little bit, and I feel that after their government jobs, you can see many of them are going to the corporate world to start working on also building these projects, these opportunities, diversifying the economy by working in the corporate world towards achieving some of these Vision 2030 goals. Because like it will take both sectors to make Vision 2030 a reality, and the government can't do it alone.
Fascinating, because that's sort of the almost the exact reverse of, say, in the States, where the private sector pays more and in many terms seen as more attention grabbing. You have a large, a bigger platform on which to shine, as opposed to if you went into government. And I guess that speaks to the activity and the weight that a place like PIF and other sort of larger state-owned enterprises are playing in the Saudi economy. Almost every so in the U.S. and because you studied here, you got a number of degrees here at Tufts, but if all things were equal at U.S. colleges in terms of quality of applicants, I'd say most of them would be about 75% women. And we've talked with many employers in Saudi Arabia when they talk about their interest in bringing women on board and expanding their employment opportunities for women. The quality of applicants vis-a-vis male applicants, almost always women are really very strong. Is that a tension in Saudi Arabia at all? I mean, when you have these really capable, motivated, focused women coming in and competing in a milieu that's really been largely male oriented, male dominated.
So the short answer is yes.
Yeah, I know you're going to try and be diplomatic, but
yes, yes, but let's just take a step back. I explained a little bit how things were different in the past for women, and there weren't as many opportunities in the corporate world and in the government sector for women. So a trend that was very present over the past couple of decades is that the level of education of women in Saudi Arabia is higher than the level of education of men. So this is statistics, right? These are numbers. And the reason for that was because they couldn't work, and therefore they spent more time at the universities getting higher degrees. So then all of a sudden the workplace opened up to women in a very very quickly. It opened up to women, and so they started applying for jobs. And so in the base case, sometimes the qualifications are higher, just because the women had more time to spend at college, and men started working sooner. So that's some of the dynamics that are very specific to this country. And so the other thing is you also have in the government and in the private sector, you have a lot of companies and senior leaders that are men that really believe in giving equal opportunities to women. And therefore, because of that, and because there haven't been that many women in the workplace, you find that they are very keen to hire as many women as possible, as quickly as possible, in order to remedy the fact that they were excluded from the workplace for many, many years. So is it true that maybe more women are finding employment opportunities than men today? Perhaps. But there are underlying factors like the level of education, the fact that they have been excluded for so long. But then when you look at hiring process at, for example, Sanofi and ExxonMobil and many global companies around the world, usually hiring is never done based on gender. It's based on, what they try to do is they try to have an equal pool of candidates to choose from. So if you're hiring for a position and you have 4 candidates that have reached the final round, and the 4 candidates are male, I think that it's only fair for companies, and this is exactly what happens at Sanofi, to ask for 50-50 representation in the pools of candidates that have applied for the specific job. And then selection is based on merit and not on gender. At
that point, when you have that more broadly represented pool.
Yes.
This is, and I don't want to put you in hypotheticals, but we're in a fascinating point right now. So Vision 2030 was announced in 2016. We are at the halfway point between 2016 and 2030. A lot of what we talk about on the 966 is that 2030 is a goal. It's not a promise. And so if these goals are 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% achieved, that's all good because it's the direction that matters. But in terms of women in the workforce, what would you like to see continue in terms of current trajectory? Where would you hope to be in the next 7 years of this sort of march to 2030?
So I think we already touched upon the fact that I can see today a lot of women in entry-level positions and few at the top. I would like to see over the next 7 years the 30% or even more than 30% workforce being women across the entire organization. I would like to see more women in board positions, CEO positions, middle management. I think that when you look at the number, it's a great number to have achieved, but if you dig a little deeper, it will not be equally distributed among organizations. And I feel that this could be the next thing that we can work on. I know that personally at Sanofi, this is something that we work on all the way globally and locally, all the way from entry level to the company. I think that Saudi Arabia has, even other countries in the region, this is not pointing the finger just here, right? There's room for improvement this area across the entire organizations and government entities.
So looking forward, it really speaks to what the Women in Business Committee is doing, because your mentorship program is trying essentially to fill these middle management, upper management, the population of Saudi women, make it larger, more competent, more more aware and more experienced, so that when it comes time to name this senior leadership and fill these upper positions, there's a good population, a very strong population of women employees in place.
Yes, so exactly. That's exactly what we're trying to do. And then also we try to choose people from different sectors. So that's another thing that I would like to see in the next 7 years. When you look at, so I was educated both in Saudi Arabia and outside of Saudi Arabia. And one of the things that I did by default was be an ambassador for the country. So every time, somebody wanted to ask about Saudi Arabia, about women, about what life is like, I tried not to take some of the comments I heard personally, because, it's lack of awareness of the country. And so I think that moving forward, the more we have women in different industries, communicating also with the outside. So one industry that's becoming very important clearly is sports. So women in sports can be a huge advantage for Saudi Arabia to showcase some of the advancements that were made in terms of the inclusion of women. And so going back to the mentorship program in WIB and the other programs that we have in WIB, we tried to select in our so we work with the Atlantic Council on a entrepreneurship mentorship program. We have our own mentorship program. We have multiple programs over the year with our sponsors. We do events on International Women's Day. We try to get a broad representation of different sectors: defense, sports, healthcare, so it's not only women across an organization at the different levels, it's also women across sectors, government, and different private sectors.
We'll give a little shout out to the 966, because you mentioned the WIN Fellows with the Atlantic Council. We're a big fan of Atlantic Council, and Amjad Ahmed over there, who's great. I know they've worked with you. Just a couple episodes, we had Renato Jeffrey and Sarah Bin Laden on, who are WIN Fellows. And I bring this up because this is why I'm so happy we get to talk with you, Dana, because Renat and Sarah are telling a specific story. It's an entrepreneurial story. It's a slice. It's very fascinating, and I think our listeners absolutely find it very interesting. Your take is a bigger picture one, and I just think it's really valuable.
Thank you. We all find our path, right? And the path of entrepreneurship is the right path for them. Some joining the government sector, some the corporate world. And so it's important to put in place programs that enable women to choose whichever sector they want based on their personal preference. And that's what we try to do at WIB for the women who choose to build their careers in the corporate world.
I'm going to do one more shout out. Apologies. I say that because upcoming later, we're speaking with the head of MENA for PepsiCo, Amr Sheikh. Mm-hmm. PepsiCo is involved with Women in Business. Mm-hmm. It's also Women with the WIN Fellows, supports all of these things. And so it seems like everywhere we go, there's PepsiCo. But anyway, what I'm doing is just, I'm connecting to different episodes, that sort of
all
thing.
The threads starting to connect
exactly.
Together. And Dana, we thank you also for your patience when you were a student here in the U.S. for all the questions that you got and the patient answers you gave in the face of general ignorance about Saudi Arabia. So that's really appreciated on behalf of 330 million Americans who ask those questions. Dana Alajlani, who is head of public affairs at the GCC at Sanofi. Just such a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for your time. This was wonderful.
Thank you. And since you guys did a shout out, I am going to do the same.
Please do.
So we have multiple sponsors of the Women in Business Committee, people who we chose people who really believe in the importance of including women. So we have Al-Alayan, who has been doing a lot for women over the past few decades. We have ExxonMobil, and Sanofi, as well as Pepsi. So really, these are companies that have been trailblazers in this area. And this is why we have partnered with them at the Women in Business in order to help us advance this cause that they really, really believe in. So thank you to our sponsors as well.
Yes. And while we're on that, Lubna Olayan, an unparalleled, extraordinary individual.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome anytime on the 966.
Yeah, join us.
Let's hope she's listening.
Yes. Shukran, Dana.
Shukran. مع السلامة.